season so far, good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, I think the real challenge going forward for the earnings, corporate earnings, is that we've seen an expansion of profit margins, which has allowed earnings to be relatively secure. But when you look at revenue growth, it continues to decline or increase at a less robust pace. And I think that's going to be the real challenge. Can profit margins continue to stay at this really elevated level and protect earnings growth? Yeah. Or do we become more concerned about revenue growth as the economy, particularly in Europe, slows?
And you're concerned about revenue growth?
I am concerned about revenue growth because the signs, particularly in Europe, where we've had, I guess, 5 quarters on the trot of negative growth and an ongoing deleveraging in the banking sector and a real lack of lending, something that Draghi has addressed yesterday, sure, is an issue.
How worried are you by, let's face it, this rather simplistic argument rendering data, it seems, meaningless right now, and this massive focus on liquidity? Are you worried about that?
I'm completely worried about that. And one thing, the issue I come back to is remembering a book that George Soros wrote in the late 1980s, and where he talked about this sort of positive feedback loop that you can get between an investor's imagination and a single idea, which seems to be this time liquidity. And in the current environment, when the data is not particularly good, it's brushed off because that only means that the date of exit from the Fed is just pushed down the road even further. And if the data is good, well, that's also good. So it's almost in a situation where we're singularly focused on liquidity as a reason to buy assets, in a way, because we've been trained that way over the last few years.
But when should investors start believing the doomsayers who say this massive hit is coming? Because it's not coming yet.
No, absolutely, it's not coming.
And a lot of you have been saying it's coming for a while.
Yeah, so I think that we become very nervous because of this delinking between the economy, which looks relatively sluggish and weak, and the explosion of asset prices. So we see a gap opening up between where the real world is and where the liquidity-fueled financial markets are. So what are the two things that could worry us? One would be if indeed we see stronger growth, which would bring forward the exit of monetary policy, or inflation, which would equally be damaging to risk assets. The second thing that would do it is a transition from the current view to one of skepticism about the effectiveness of policy going forward. Now, we're certainly not there yet.